Hey there, welcome to episode 17 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. It is very early in the morning of pre-sunrise on the morning of March 6, 2024. It is a Wednesday morning. Allergies in full swing. Voice suffering, of course. We'll see if we can make it through. Today the topic is building things. Building, making, learning how things work, etc. I think there are two types of people in the world. Those who appreciate Steve Wozniak, sometimes called the Woz, and those who appreciate Steve Jobs, just Steve Jobs. I'm in the Woz camp 100%. How about you? First of all, what are those two camps? Woz was a tinkerer, certainly a maker, an inventor, always inquisitive. Jobs was all about marketing, product, user experience. Two sides of the same coin, arguably. They did pretty well, but they are different. In a nutshell, Woz was a fan of the open system, having slots in your computer so you can plug things in, try things out. The game port and the slots in the Apple II series of computers, for example, documented. You could hack on them. Jobs is more of a closed, do it my way or don't do it at all kind of guy. You should not be curious about how it works. You should not be thinking about how to improve or change. You should do it the way I want you to do it. That's it. How about some links? Links in the show notes or the description, wherever you found this audio program. The first two, as usual, my buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo link, links to this and other audio programs and other projects. You are under no obligation to buy me any coffee, but there is a link or two or three to some of my favorite coffee beans. Any proceeds arriving through the buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo path will indeed go towards coffee or coffee devices. Who knows? A grinder, a coffee making apparatus, a pour over, a fin, a mocha pot. Who knows? Could be anything. I posted on ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. I don't know how this will work for non-subscribers to that channel. We'll have to experiment a little bit. It is what it is. It's there. There are a few items. I've linked to Wikipedia pages for them. Tinker Toys, Lego. I just use Lego, but it's I think it's Lego blocks, Lego building blocks. I can't remember what the official name is. Don't call it Legos. Lego is the trademark name. Lego and erector sets. I never had an erector set, but we will talk about it. Actually, I do now. I think they're made of plastic, if I recall. I think some metal in there. Oh, no. I have metal ones and plastic. Both. Two great tastes. I have an article from tech.co from 2015. It's Steve Wozniak talking about Steve Jobs. How Steve Jobs was not really a coder, not technical, which is fine, like I said. I have a link to the Wikipedia page for the Apple II. I personally had an Apple IIe, but I certainly had exposure to playtime with the Apple II line when I was in junior high school. I have a link to another Wikipedia page, we're on a roll, about the Volkswagen Bug, the Volkswagen Beetle, my first car, 1970 Volkswagen Beetle, standard transmission, of course. A link to the Wikipedia page about the America's Greatest Makers reality show, co-produced by Intel Corporation, and what's his name? Steve Burnett? No. What's his first name? Anyway, Burnett. Survivor, whatever, all those reality shows. Fab Lab, another Wikipedia page, although there is no shortage of information about the Fab Lab concept, conceived and still driven to this day by the likes of Neil Gershenfeld at MIT. And I have a link to my alma mater, HMC, Harvey Mudd College, hmc.edu, directly to the source. No small part, but certainly not the only part of my personal development as a builder of things, as a maker of things. I don't know if I would call myself a maker. True makers really put their brains where their mouths are, so to speak. They're almost nonstop. So I don't know if I would fall under the true maker category, but certainly the maker ethos. So let's get started. Building versus buying. I was sitting in the Bits and Atoms lab that was run at the time. It was quite an expansive makerspace, a Fab Lab. I can't remember which level it is. It's not the full Make Another Fab Lab level, but it's pretty close. Lots and lots of toys. At the time, managed by Nadia Peak, currently Professor Nadia Peak at University of Washington, UW, in Seattle. She was describing this notion that you are either someone who would just rather buy it or you're someone who would build it or make it. And that Bits and Atoms and her pursuits were more about those who would build things. So there was a tiny little makerspace near MIT, but for civilians, normal people, they had an end mill. They had toaster ovens that you could use to reflow surface mount electronics. They had other, soldering irons and other electronics devices, some other devices for making things. It was certainly not a Fab Lab class of makerspace, but it was a legitimate place where you could do some stuff, make some stuff. Now, not everyone is going to make an end mill. You're not going to be making machine tools to make other machine tools unless you are really good. But the fact that they were showing people how to reflow electronics with toaster ovens and how to make the thing you're trying to make, or more likely it starts out as repairing something that you need to repair. This was pretty cool. So in order to accomplish these things, you kind of need to know how things work. So you need to know how things work well enough to make working things, or to fix them to make them work. And it is ultimately a life skill we should all have to some degree, my opinion. When we don't, markets are born. If I don't know how to make a thing, but you do, you can make it for me and I will buy it from you. The more that happens, I suppose the better the market for the few, but the weaker the future for the many. The more tenuous, how about that? Not weaker, but tenuous. Because if the people who know how things work go away, maybe you're reading Atlas Shrugged, maybe you've seen The Time Machine, maybe just the notion of people who don't want to do it anymore are the only ones who know how, the American farmer, et cetera, et cetera. So your future, if you don't know how to make or do or farm or grow or, all these things, if you completely and totally depend on someone else, you hopefully know where to find your encyclopedia when the people who know how to manage the internet go away. I did the reality show, like I said. It was an interesting time. It eventually, and in short order actually, turned into America's Greatest Entrepreneur. Way too much focus on monetization because Intel as a corporation, that's what they were for making money. The whole maker innovator group that I was in wasn't really connected to the maker movement. It was sort of bolted on. But it was a visible tip of a maker iceberg. It was an interesting sense that we could gain. The people that were competing in the show were probably half and half makers that wanted to do something. Okay, I guess I'll make a product out of my idea. Other half where I have a product idea and I will be a maker to make it, prototype onto launchable product. So I would say though, we had 24 teams, a maximum of 3 people. So I think it was something like 50 total contestants, whittled down to one winner. That is a vast minority of the population. I think if I remember correctly, there were over 150 teams that submitted. I remember, I didn't scroll through each one, but I do remember that there was some number like that they initial submissions whittled it down to like 75. Then they were talking to the production company, the Mark Burnett's production company, collaborating on which projects would not only be viable, but would also look good on TV, because that's what it came down to. So not a fair indication, but still not a lot of submissions. I would have thought 10 times as many. Maybe there were, and they only made it down to the what was it, the executive VP or some VP that was going through them. Maybe by the time it got to that level, they had whittled it down already, but who knows? About 150 though, I think. So that was much later. My own indoctrination into this notion started when I learned how to read. I think I was 2 to 3 years old. A lot of Cat in the Hat, a lot of Dr. Seuss, who has gotten a bad rap in modernity, but in his time, the way the world was, I don't know that he deserves quite as much criticism, but we'll leave it there. I did learn how to read the entire Cat in the Hat series, which I think we had a lot of the books, so they were good for me. I learned how to read the words. I wasn't really thinking about his past. When my sister and I were young, we had a rarity now on the west side of the country, but we had a basement that was basically, it had one big room that became our toy room, had an old couch, a TV. We we were 5 and 3 before we moved. We had a TV down there, and my dad had a workshop, our laundry room, our boiler for hot water, some other things. The toy room was cool, so that was lots of toys, educational and otherwise. So for myself, I had Tinker Toys, both the wooden, I think we had wooden later. We had these giant plastic Tinker Toys, giant for me at the time. They made normal size, but big giant Tinker Toys, plenty of Lego by the time I was age 5. And my dad had erector sets when he was younger. I don't remember if they were easy to get at the time. Certainly the tiny little parts, the little screws and nuts that would hold the erector set components together when you're building a bridge or whatever else. Probably best not to have them for younger ages, but I don't remember them being so popular by the time I got older. We moved to Arizona, so the entire toy notion had to be rebuilt. At the time when I was living in New Jersey, we lived in a small neighborhood in New Milford, and I went to Berkeley Elementary. We lived on Graphic Boulevard, and I used to wander around our neighborhood when I was 4 years old, 5 years old, walked to school, knew the crossing guard, knew my neighbors, so it was easy to become a social person, probably helpful later in life to be able to talk to people you don't know and who are much taller. But I think it's a route that led to my interest and support of, I guess, co-creation. You cannot possibly design or create things for other people sitting in a cubicle by yourself. That is completely obvious. Just get to know people. Start early. You'll get that. My education continued. I had my Volkswagen Bug. I learned how it worked. Some trials and tribulations with an engine build, shocks replacement, brake shoes, some electrical components, changing my own oil, adjusting my own valves and timing. Not earth shattering. There was no ODB2 port. There was no requirement for electronics devices to test anything. A light. I can't remember how I did it. You can make a timing light yourself with a alligator clip and some wire and a 12-volt bulb. And I cannot remember how I did this. I think you'd attach it. I can't remember where you attach it, but anyway, you attach it to. I wish I could remember. You want the light to go off at the correct point for idle, so you know how far off TDC to get and all that. So anyway, some hackery, learning how automotive systems worked. It's amazing how much of an engineering platform a car is when you really start looking at it. All these different components that have to work together and moving, sort of a self-contained, self-powering, et cetera, et cetera. Had an Apple IIe when I was in high school, just getting into high school. So the Apple II Plus was one I had more experience with at the time. Got the IIe when I graduated from 8th grade. The Apple IIe was cool. It had the memory card slot, I think it was. I was part of an Apple users group, so I got a discount on a Checkmate Technologies memory card with 1 megabyte of RAM. That was cool. Bank switched, of course. I learned how to program assembly on 6502. I got a Z80 card so I could use Borland Pascal, which I was learning on VAX at Grand Canyon Community College when I was helping someone with limited eyesight take a Pascal course at the community college. I was hacking on disks, learning how the IWM, the integrated Waz-Wendell machine, the disk controller in the old Apple II series, how did that work? So I learned all about the 143K floppy disk, et cetera, plugging things into the game port to control and to be controlled by, et cetera, enunciators, all that great stuff. Eventually I would go on to college, Harvey Mudd College, as linked. This is a school that really focuses more on learning things without being taught. It was such a deal. It wasn't a school that was bent on sitting in a classroom to learn everything. It was, as Mark Twain might say, don't let your classes get in the way of your education. So a lot of what we learned was very practical. Our clinic program was a seminal part. It was initially an engineering clinic. It has, over the years, evolved into a cross-disciplinary platform for learning beyond what you've learned. So you learn how systems will work in the real world. In the real world, You very rarely get a lecture on the project you're working on and then begin working on the project. You often have to hit the ground running, as they say. So it was an interesting school. Although I will say, in my travels, I have wondered whether I would have fit in better at MIT. I think Harvey Mudd was good. I don't think I would have been a Caltech person, but I think MIT would have been interesting. Definitely a different path. So I ponder. In the real world, the desire to have better things, to have things that work better, the ability to take steps in that direction, whether alone or maybe with others, sometimes if you can find others, it's a non-trivial element of an interesting life. If you are able to take a creative notion and turn it into a tangible thing, and this could be, as I always say, could be anything from an idea for a recipe, whether it's a food or drink item, could be a creative work, like an artist, sculpture, painting, metal work, etc. Could be software, could be hardware, could be something in space, could be anything. We are fast approaching a time when turning most things, most ideas into things is only more possible. Now, I'm not saying you're going to be launching yourself into space this year, but you only need a couple $1 billion. You used to have to be like a government. No longer true. So if you can think in systems, like how do things fit together, and you kind of get that by learning or wanting to learn how things come apart, what makes them tick. If you were a kid and you like to take things apart, deconstruct things, and it could be physical objects, it could be hacking on software, it could be reverse engineering a menu item, a recipe, right? That's been done many times. How to make your own Big Mac, how to make your own Mrs. Fields cookies, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have that mindset, if you think in systems and how systems come together, how they function, this is, I think, the beginning of how you can build or make either your own notions or make the things you have better. You could take a can of spaghetti sauce, or a jar, I should say, a can sometimes, and add some additional ingredients to make it taste the way you want. You could do the same with most things. You can mostly hack on things to make them work. You can look up IKEA hacking. Happens all the time. So how can you turn systemic solutions? You think in systems and you have an idea. How do you turn that into some sort of implementation? Well, you can go get ingredients and try out your food or drink idea. No shortage of free software to start on a software or even a hardware journey. There are plenty of free software tools to make hardware, and the list goes on. We have an embarrassment of riches at our disposal for implementing an idea, even at system scope, big ideas. So implementation is always a challenge every time, but it's becoming less of a hurdle to get over. Challenge, yes. Impossible? Not really. Except for the space thing. That'll be a little bit longer. So is this a matter of nature or nurture, or both? I would ask, is intellectual curiosity innate, or can we cultivate it? And I would like to think it is both. But the more I am exposed to people of different backgrounds, different cultures, etc., I kind of think it's something in the water. It's something that you're born with. It's innate. I think it can be cultivated, but I don't know if it can be summoned from where it does not exist. So intellectual curiosity. And now I think humans have a certain amount of, it's in our nature to be intellectually curious. The question may almost always be exactly what about. If you are a nascent chef, but you think you're a programmer, you may not have any intellectual curiosity about the latest JavaScript functionality, or should I learn RISC-V assembly? And maybe you've just never tried cooking. Maybe you, once you get your hands on a measuring spoon and a mixing bowl and a whisk, etc., maybe you're like, hey, this is what fascinates me. This is where I find my inspiration. It's important, I think, to find or identify those early. I think it probably gets around frustration. For myself, I always use the table of Lego. That is to say, if you were to spread a bunch of Lego bricks out on a table, a big work table with people, people sitting, standing, you take the Lego, you dump them out. Maybe they're from a kit or a project with specs, with an instruction manual to build it. Maybe it's the Millennium Falcon kit. Maybe it's just a mixture of kits. Maybe it's a random assortment of Lego. There may be a couple of people in the room, 1, 2, 10, 1%, 5% of the room may start fiddling with the parts without even considering documentation. Am I supposed to build something? They don't even ask for instructions or direction. They just start sticking things together. A few other people, maybe another 10%, might join in. Like, oh, did you need a red 2x2 brick? I don't know the lexicon now. So 2x2 full height, red. So they might help find pieces. They may be supportive of the initial, the initiation of some assembly, some inspiration. So some people are supportive, and then the rest of the people may be looking around like, are we supposed to be doing this? They may just go, I'll let them do their thing, and they get back on their phone. So that is my sort of visualization of a population of innovators, creators, supportive sort of followers or enablers. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Not everybody has found their niche. Like if it was a table full of ingredients, the populations of those first two, the people who start playing with the ingredients might be the group of people who are more supportive with the Lego bricks, right? So you don't know. But I think there's that segment of the population that tends to be spectators. I think it's too big. That's my opinion, but I think it's true. More people are buying than building. More people have no innate curiosity about how the things that they use and depend on each day work. Where does this food come from? Where does this phone come from? Where does this information come from that I'm taking as gospel truth on my phone? One person with a maker mindset, a desire to comprehend and perhaps build or rebuild, innovate, improve a thing, a notion, an idea, a recipe, whatever, will do well on their own. There's something to be said for someone who, if they're bored, turn that boredom into some form of action. Not everyone is bored at the same time. There is a theory that the lack of boredom, now that there's always some sort of stimulation and distraction available on a device in your pocket 24/7, algorithmically feeding you distraction, that boredom is no longer being converted into creativity, ideation, innovation, implementation, but more into monetization and not a dopamine hit, but a distracted form of gratification. So are individuals so inclined to turn their notions into things? Maybe, maybe not. It's that population breakdown again. Which percentage of who is doing what? When you are surrounded by others of a similar mind, like minds, not necessarily skills. Again, with the example I gave, I may be in a room full of chefs or nascent chefs. If we spread Lego on the table, they may or may not, that's interesting. Whereas if we spread a bunch of ingredients on a table, they may dive right in, and I would be like, is there a microwave? So everybody has their scale or interest, something that has emerged from their deepest recesses and become perhaps their passion, certainly something they understand and are a little bit more interested in. But having that mindset of saying, I'm gonna mess with that. I'm gonna mix those ingredients together. I don't even know what they were. Any Chopped, a cooking game show of sorts, Top Chef, one of the more popular ones. Any of these cooking shows where they Iron Chef is a good one. Iron Chef America, if you've seen that one. Like, here's a mystery ingredient. You have to make it go. For me, I would be like, do we have the internet? But if you are truly a chef, you may draw inspiration from a history of, or a vastly more creative notion of, how to mix ingredients together into something delightful. And if you're a programmer, you do that with software. If you are a kitchen designer, you do that with appliances and countertops. And a useful, optimized workflow. No more of that work triangle. So if you can surround yourself with people that are similarly motivated, and you do this at the gym, if you go to the gym, you go to the gym by yourself, you probably do fine. If you go to the gym with a workout buddy, a gym partner, then whenever you don't feel like going and the other person does, you both go, squeeze a little bit extra performance or gains, whatever your goals are. If you're in a gym, you are surrounded by other people, even if you never talk to them. Similar goals, similar methodologies. You might learn a thing or two from someone doing something a little bit differently, kind of a maker space for physicality. And then you may have a home gym that you use sometimes, but there's probably a difference. This is where it comes down to, I think, the difference between being a solo, maybe an introverted, creative person, and someone who puts themselves out there a little bit. You encounter other people with similar mind. You never know what could happen with the intermingling of these skills and interests. You may have a bent on user experience, on language translation, all kinds of other stuff that coincidentally we are looking for at the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. Not everything is code. So if you ever find some application that's like, who designed this? It's probably the coder. Probably the person writing the code said, oh, it works for me. So mixing ideas from different interest areas with similar mindset. Like, let's turn nothing into something and then make it work better. And then show it to other people and listen to their feedback. These are all skills that come from a certain amount of innate intellectual curiosity. Not only how does it work, but how does it work for others? I think these are critical skills, and I don't know if they can be taught. I think they can be cultivated, and I think they probably exist already. But do you know what they are for you and for the people around you? Maybe you have kids, maybe your friends, etc. And finally, this is going to be a brief show. That's good. My voice is really arguing with me. I should have an AI voice read it for me. A word on AI. So this comes up now and then locally for me, especially with our projects. There are a couple of times people would ask, can we use AI, or I just use AI to write the code. Now, if you are a new, recent boot camp or school graduate, or if you're completely self-taught, please interact with other people who are further along in their education in whatever it is. If you are still new at the game and you find that you're using AI, machine learning tools, you're using ChatGPT or Copilot or any of a myriad of other possibilities to write your code for you, to write your emails for you, to respond to your customers for you, to create recipes for you. My concern is if you're very early, you are not learning, you are replacing. You are not supplementing your abilities. You are replacing your ability to learn, or the benefit of your experience is being handed over to an automated tool that doesn't care whether it's good or bad. It just spits out words, statistical models. There's a Twitch streamer. There are several. There's a Twitch streamer named The Primogen. He's a programmer for Netflix. He had an interesting point recently. You're not going to watch his video, so I'm not going to even link to it. But if you look for him, The Primogen, he pointed out there's a trough. There's experienced coders. So I've been an engineer for 30 years. I still like writing my own stuff. But if I was going to use a Copilot tool, and as he points out, the code it generates is okay. It's really, as someone, I think it was a Linus Torvalds panel discussion, AI tools are autofill or autocorrect on steroids. It's autofill probably. So they just paste in a bunch of stuff, and you might find, oh, that's okay, or oh, okay, that's a good starting point. I didn't have to type as much. So a lot of boilerplate, a lot of stuff that just, oh yeah, okay, that's how I would do that. Write me a bubble sort. Okay. That's not something you really need to spend a lot of time on. So code that already exists, it saves you from having to go and copy and paste it from Stack Overflow or Stack Exchange. So if you know what you're doing already as a supplement, as a tool, you can say you're not hand coding assembly language or machine code. You're not even decoding your C or JavaScript. You're not human compiling it into ones and zeros to feed into your microprocessor. You're using compilers, using interpreters. So as a tool, AI is useful as a supplemental tool. If you are completely unaware, and this I'm finding this more and more lately, this is my opinion, more and more people who are learning to be front-end developers on websites, they just go to a boot camp for 12 or 16 weeks. They learn how JavaScript works. They learn a couple of back-end tricks with SQL and maybe Mongo document database. So they learn enough to accomplish some goals. If you are, and so I'm obviously focusing on computers because that's my thing, you can apply the same thing to almost anything. I learned how to do assembly language on multiple processors. I know how registers work. I know how different opcodes, like what their side effects are, status fields, status bits. When you look at how a compiler works, you can see that it's compile. I learned C by watching step trace through my source code, and then right next to it, it was a Power C compiler a long time ago. You could watch the assembly code that it had written. Watch it execute, watch the stack. You could watch different memory locations. If you're using GDB and GCC, you can do the same or similar. By now, you could do the same. I'm sure that, not rocket science. But if you are, well, actually, it kind of is. If you are learning how computers work by saying, this is when I do this, it does that. And when it does that, then I need to fix this. Then when you are doing things like writing JavaScript that runs on any browser, it's interpreted, you bytecodes, like what are the bytecodes doing? Or how is the interpreter working? Oh, it's based on self. What is a proto? What is a parent slot? So as you build up this library of knowledge based on experience, you may find that, well, I don't need to waste time doing the same thing. But if you've never learned how a computer works and you only code in JavaScript to make your web application work, you may or may not really have a feeling for how the system is working. You're not thinking systemically, you're thinking solution-wise. You just want to solve a problem. You have no real background or experience or gut feeling for why certain things might be happening. So as more and more people eschew old school thinking for the sake of finishing a project now, shipping a product now, fix it later, the term tech debt comes up. Technical debt is when you put it off, fix it later, in a nutshell. So his theory, Primogen, was suggesting that the people learning code, if they become dependent on or make overuse of tools like Copilot and GitHub Copilot or other coding assistants, if they rely on AI too much, they don't really know what it's doing. They don't know why it's doing it. They don't know the underlying results. So something to think about. Same with, have AI write you a menu. Maybe the choices it makes are based on a ton of other menus. So your menu is just like everybody else's. Well, why do these pairings go? Why does this go with that? I don't know. Got it from the AI. So this can apply to most things. So myself, I try to avoid using AI for things that I can't do myself. Now, I have used artificial intelligence tools, especially on Canva, to make cover art for our podcast episodes. The audio program is not about my artistic skills or lack of. And I have to say, I'm mostly disappointed. Like, it's good enough. It's okay. I don't know. I mean, it's part of I pay Canva, and Canva licenses their tools and however that works. So I can't say that I'm participating too much in theft of intellectual property. I hope they're not. But none of the designs that I've ended up with from my textual descriptions have been overwhelming. They're more about like, okay, I wanted to, I used Google Gemini when they launched the Android app. I said, give me a picture of a truck covered in pizza. And it gave me 4 images. One was a food truck with a pizza logo. So a slice of pizza, like, I don't know how I would describe it. Like, not floating, but it was a slice of pizza was like kind of the logo that was mounted on the roof of a food truck. And then there was another picture that looked like a Volkswagen bus with pizza slices instead of paint, like dribbling off of it. Okay. I don't know if that's really what I wanted or what I was thinking of. I don't know if I was really thinking about anything, but it was interesting to see it trying to come up with something, and neither was really great. It was okay. So I kind of wonder if relying on AI tools like, oh, let's lay off 12,000 people and just use AI. If our chefs and really creative people we're gonna go the way of TV dinners, if I can go with the same analogy. So we'll end up with like uninspired, completely functional, reasonably interesting, may or may not be tasty, but it won't be inspired. It won't be new. It will be a rehashing of what already exists. And that is how large language models work. Predictive analytical models, that's a different story. Maybe we'll get there. Don't know. On the other hand, if you've ever watched the movie The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, as the titular character eventually. If the computer does not understand what a steak should taste like, or what humans are supposed to be, what living matter, doesn't have to be human, the pod, the computer controlling the pods, so the pod would read in what was in the pod, and if it was a human or a life form, a baboon, whatever, it had no idea what to do with it. So it would rearrange it, mess it up. So we had to program the computer to understand what a steak should taste like, and then on from there. How to mix a fly and a human, unfortunately, that was a bug. Haha. The human still needs to be a partner in this process, otherwise what you end up with looks, maybe even smells like steak, but it doesn't taste like steak. And that is why I think it is so important to know how to build and make things, how to turn ideas into reality. And that is where I will end it today. Thanks for putting up this voice. I will tell you, so it's about 6 a.m. now, 5:58. At about 2 o'clock this morning, my voice was great. There's something about breathing and being upright that causes problems. Either way, my voice is tired, and you are probably tired of listening to it. So I'll leave it here. Don't forget, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. Check out my various other programs and projects. There may be a YouTube component. Well, there's going to be a YouTube component of this because Google Podcasts are going away. They're moving any of their podcast publication to YouTube. So I've already got YouTube at names for my various programs as well. I would kind of like to try some live stream discussion if I could find people who are interesting to talk to. Is that you? So we'll roll out a bunch of things with the various projects, and there's a news platform project that we're working on for Innovate for Vegas and so on. So there's lots of things. So you can check that out if you like. ko-fi.com/DanHugo. I will figure out how to send out notifications with that if anybody's interested. And in the meantime, check out some of those other links. And the Apple II, kind of a game changer. I wish mobile phones and the Aria project, the Block project that Google bought, Project Aura, I think it was Aura, the modular cell phone. I think Framework needs to launch a mobile phone. I think that'd be a game changer. The more ability you have to fiddle with things, the better. It's good for you, good for everybody. On that note, I thank you. Until next time.